Episode 4. The Light That Stayed On. Part 1. The Repair. The morning air in Maple Hollow was brisk, the kind that wakes you up before you're ready. Daniel stood on the front porch, a mug of reheated motel coffee cooling in his hands, staring up at the porch light, the same light that had greeted him the night he returned. That warm yellow glow, the one he thought his mother had left on for him, the one that had made him believe, for a brief, miraculous second, that she somehow knew he'd come home. Now, in the daylight, it looked different. Old, weathered, tilted slightly to the left, like it had been bumped too many times. Daniel set his coffee down and dragged over an old wooden chair he found leaning against the railing. It creaked under his weight as he climbed up to inspect the fixture. Dust, spider webs, rusted screws, a bulb so cloudy it was almost gray. "This thing shouldn't even be working," he muttered. He unscrewed the bulb. It crumbled in his fingers. Not shattered, crumbled. The socket itself was loose, hanging by a single brittle wire. He blinked, confused. That light, the one he saw glowing that first night, shouldn't have been able to turn on. His chest tightened. With a small twist, the entire fixture gave way. Behind it, the wiring was dead cut off completely. "It hasn't worked in years," he whispered. The realization landed with a quiet, heavy thud. All his life, he had misunderstood so many things: his mother's anger, her distance, her silence. And now, even this last symbol he clung to, the one he thought was a message, wasn't what it seemed. He sat down on the top porch step, holding the broken piece in his hands. "So it wasn't you," he said aloud, voice cracking in the empty yard. "You didn't leave the light on for me." But then another thought came gently, unexpectedly. Maybe she didn't have to. Maybe some things didn't work the way they were supposed to, yet still found a way to shine when someone needed them. Maybe this house had been waiting for him the way she once did. After a long moment, Daniel wiped his face with the back of his sleeve and stood. If the light was broken, then he'd fix it. If something needed repairing, then he'd learn. If he was tired of running, then he would stop. Back inside, he rummaged through drawers until he found a rusted toolbox, hammer, electrical tape, a half-empty pack of bulbs. He carried everything out to the porch and got to work. The sun climbed higher as he reattached wires, tightened screws, tested connections. His hands weren't steady, but they were determined. At one point he paused, holding the new bulb between his fingers, whispering, "Let's see if I can give you a second chance." He screwed it in, stepped down from the chair, and flipped the switch inside the door. Nothing happened. For a second, disappointment hit hard. Another thing he couldn't fix, another thing he was too late for. But then, a faint spark, a soft flicker, a trembling glow, and finally, the bulb warmed to life, steady, bright, and unwavering. Daniel let out a shaky breath. He didn't know why, but the sight of that simple working light filled him with something he hadn't felt in a long time. Resolve. Maybe even hope. He whispered to himself, "All right, one thing fixed. Maybe I can fix the rest too." The wind rustled the trees. The repaired light glowed, and Daniel stepped back inside, unaware of how much this small moment would matter. Part 2. The recipe he couldn't get right. The kitchen felt different now. Not because anything had changed. Everything was still exactly as his mother left it. The floral curtains, the mismatched mugs, the dented saucepan she refused to replace. No, the difference was in him. For the first time since he returned, Daniel stepped into the kitchen not to clean, not to wander in and out, but to try, to do something he had avoided his entire adult life. He spread out the cookbook, her old, grease-stained notebook, across the counter. The pages fluttered as he opened it to the recipe he had chosen: Sunday chicken stew. He remembered the smell. He remembered the warmth. He remembered sitting at the table as a boy, swinging his legs too fast, waiting for the first scoop. And he remembered how long it had been since he tasted anything made with love. "All right, Mom," he muttered. "Let's see what you got." He set out the ingredients as written: carrots, potatoes, celery, chicken thighs, broth, herbs. He eyed the vegetables with mild suspicion. He had never chopped anything bigger than a lemon in his life. The first carrot rolled off the counter and thumped onto the floor. "Good start," he sighed. He picked it up, rinsed it, then attempted to slice it. The knife slipped. The slices came out uneven, some paper thin, some thick enough to be coasters. He dumped them into the pot anyway. Next came the onions. Within seconds, his eyes were burning, his nose running, his breath hitching. He waved a hand in front of his face. "This is chemical warfare," he croaked. By the time everything was chopped and added, he felt like he'd run a marathon. He turned on the stove. The burner flickered blue. The pot began to simmer. For a moment, he allowed himself to feel hopeful. It almost smelled like her stew. Almost. He reached for the salt, then added more salt, then accidentally spilled half the container. He tried to scoop it out with his hand, but made it worse, swirling the pot into a cloudy, oversalted mess. He groaned. "Okay, not great, but maybe it'll even out?" It didn't. When he finally ladled out a spoonful and brought it to his lips, his face contorted instantly. It tasted like ocean water mixed with regret. He spat it into the sink, coughing. "Oh God, I'm poisoning myself." He leaned against the counter, shoulders shaking not with anger, but with a bitter laugh. He tried. He really tried. But being in this kitchen made him feel like a child again, hopelessly small, clumsy, and longing for something he couldn't recreate. He dumped the stew into the trash, the heavy splash echoing in the quiet room. Steam rose like a sigh of defeat. Daniel stood in the silence, staring down at the empty pot. "I just wanted to make it right," he whispered. "Not just the stew. Not just today. Everything." He exhaled, slow and unsteady. Maybe cooking wasn't about copying the recipe perfectly. Maybe it was about trying at all. Maybe it was one more small step toward the man he wanted to become. He washed the pot, dried it, and placed it gently back on the stove, exactly where she used to leave it. Then he whispered into the quiet kitchen, "I'll try again tomorrow." And for the first time in a long time, that promise felt real. Part 3. The Neighbor at the Door. The afternoon sun had begun to fade, casting long shadows across the front yard, when Daniel heard a soft knock on the door. It wasn't urgent. It wasn't loud. Just a gentle tap-tap, like someone who already knew the house well enough not to startle it. Daniel wiped his hands on a towel and hesitated before opening the door. Standing on the porch was Mrs. Ellery, his mother's closest neighbor. A woman in her 70s, hair silver as moonlight, bundled in a cardigan 2 sizes too big. Her eyes, kind, familiar, searched his face. "Daniel Hayes," she said with a tired smile. "It's been, what, 20 years? Something like that," he replied. awkward but polite. She held a small container in her hands, lasagna, the kind neighbors bring when words aren't enough. She offered it without ceremony. "I thought you should have this. You probably haven't eaten a proper meal since the funeral." Daniel accepted it, surprised at how heavy it felt. Maybe it wasn't the food. Maybe it was everything it meant. "Thank you, really. May I come in for a bit?" she asked gently. Daniel nodded and stepped aside. She walked in slowly, eyes drifting over the living room the way someone might look at a place filled with ghosts only she could see. "It looks the same," she murmured. "That was your mother, you know. She didn't throw things away unless they absolutely fell apart." Daniel managed a small smile. "Yeah, I'm learning that." Mrs. Ellery rested on the edge of the couch, folding her hands over her lap. There was a quiet moment, one of those heavy silences that fills a room before something important is said. Then she looked at him with a softness so earnest it almost hurt. "She was lonely, Daniel." The words hit harder than he expected. He blinked. "Lonely?" She nodded. "She didn't want to bother you. She always said you were busy, had your own life, your own troubles. She didn't want to be a burden." Daniel swallowed, his throat tight. "I should have called more." Mrs. Ellery shook her head gently. She wasn't angry, not once. Even when she was hurting, she defended you, said you were doing your best, said you'd come home when you were ready. Daniel looked away, jaw clenched. He remembered the unread messages on his phone, the missed calls, the holidays he skipped, the years he let pass without checking in. He felt himself sinking under the weight of all the things he couldn't undo. "She started leaving the porch light on every night about 5 years ago," Mrs. Ellery continued. "She said it helped her sleep, said she liked knowing it was ready, just in case." Daniel rubbed a hand over his face, fighting the sting in his eyes. 5 years. 5 years of her waiting. 5 years of her hoping he'd walk through that door. Mrs. Ellery reached over and patted his hand. "She loved you with everything she had, even when it hurt, even when you were far away." He whispered back, barely audible, "I didn't think she needed me." "Oh, we all need someone," she said softly. "Even mothers, especially mothers." Daniel sat down beside her, feeling the truth of that settle into his chest, quiet, aching, undeniable. They spoke for a while longer about his childhood, about the holidays his mother spent alone but never complained about the baked bread she used to bring over to the neighbors just for fun. When Mrs. Ellery finally stood to leave, she paused at the doorway. "You're here now," she said, "and that counts for something." Daniel nodded. "Thank you for telling me." She gave him one last comforting smile before shuffling off the porch and down the walkway. When he closed the door, the house felt different again. Not lighter, not heavier, just more honest. And for the first time, Daniel let himself feel all of it. The regret, the grief, the love he didn't know how to show, and the strange new determination rising quietly in his chest. The kind that said, "I can still do better. I can still be someone she'd be proud of." Part 4. More like her than he knew. The house was quiet again after Mrs. Ellery left. A deeper kind of quiet this time. Not empty, not hollow, just reflective, like the air itself had settled into thought. Daniel wandered into the hallway, his footsteps soft on the old wooden floorboards. He didn't have a destination in mind. He just needed to move, to let the conversation from moments earlier wash through him without drowning. He paused at the hallway mirror. It was a simple frame, white paint chipped at the corners, glass slightly fogged from years of humidity. His mother used to stand here before church, applying lipstick, adjusting her hair, humming in that off-key way he used to tease her about. Daniel caught his own reflection. There were lines around his eyes he didn't remember having, gray strands spreading through his hair like frost, a tiredness that ran deeper than sleep could fix. He sighed. God, when did I get this old? He leaned closer, studying himself, not just the face, but the expression, the small habits, the posture. And that was when he saw it. Not something new, something familiar, something he had spent years pretending wasn't there. He stepped back, breathing out slowly. He looked like his mother. Not exactly, of course, but the shape of his eyes, hers. The worried crease in his brow, hers. The way he pressed his lips together when he thought too hard, that was her, unmistakably. He felt his throat tighten. Growing up, he had always hated when people said it. You're just like your mother. He'd take it as an insult, as if being compared to her meant he wasn't strong enough, successful enough, man enough. He ran from that idea. He ran for decades. But now, standing in this hallway, staring at the truth reflected back at him, he didn't feel insulted. He felt something else, something warmer, something painful, something strangely comforting. He rested his palm against the wall, fingers brushing over the faded floral wallpaper. He remembered her hands always busy, always tired, always gentle even when her words weren't. He remembered her saying, "One day, you'll understand." He had rolled his eyes then, young and angry and convinced he knew everything. Now he felt the weight of those words settle on his chest. He understood now. Too late for apologies. Too late for a second chance with her. But not too late for himself. Not too late for Alex. He walked into the living room and sat in her armchair, the one she used to read in every night. The cushion sank beneath his weight, soft and familiar. As he sank into it, he realized something he hadn't allowed himself to see until now. He and his mother had the same kind of heart. Stubborn, protective, lonely, afraid to ask for help, always pretending to be fine, always loving harder than they knew how to say. He rubbed his palms against his jeans, that old nervous gesture he used to do before difficult conversations. He whispered into the quiet room, "I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner, Mom." A long breath escaped him, shaky, exhausted, but honest. He didn't know where this new understanding would lead him, but he knew one thing. He couldn't keep running from himself. Not anymore. Not when he finally saw who he was, and who he came from, and how much she had shaped him. Not with perfection, but with persistence. The same persistence he felt flickering to life inside him now. He stood, steadier than before. There was still a long way to go, a lot to mend, a lot to face. But he wasn't afraid of the mirror anymore. He wasn't afraid of being her son. He wasn't afraid of trying. Part 5. The Call That Wasn't Easy. The evening settled slowly over Maple Hollow, turning the sky a muted blue. Inside the house, Daniel lingered near the kitchen table, staring at his phone. He'd been pacing for nearly 15 minutes. Sitting down, standing up, picking up the phone, setting it back down, muttering quiet curses under his breath. He wasn't afraid of calling his son. He was afraid of what wouldn't be said. The silences, the distance, the old wounds that sat between them like a locked door neither had the key for. Finally, he exhaled through his nose and whispered, "Just do it." He tapped Alex's name. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. By the 4th ring, Daniel's hand was shaking. Then, a click, a breath. Alex's voice, tight and guarded. "Dad." That single word sliced straight through him. "Hey, Alex," Daniel said, trying to sound casual but failing. He cleared his throat. "Thanks for picking up." On the other end, he heard movement, maybe Alex sitting down, maybe shifting uncomfortably. It was impossible to tell. "What do you need?" Alex asked. Not, "How are you?" Not, "Are you okay?" Just that stripped-down, defensive question. A reminder of how far apart they were. Daniel swallowed hard. I'm at Grandma's house," he began. "I'm cleaning things up. There's a lot here to get through." Silence. A long one. He imagined Alex staring at a wall, jaw tight, waiting for the inevitable emotional ambush. "I just wanted to check on you," Daniel added softly. Alex's reply came sharp, reflexive. "You don't have to do that." "I know," Daniel said, "but I want to." More silence. But this time, something in it felt different. Not warm, not open, but maybe less hostile. Alex sighed. "Look, Dad, it's late here. I've got work in the morning." "I understand." Daniel rubbed his forehead, wishing he had the nerve to say all the things he'd been rehearsing for years. "I'm sorry. I wasn't there when you needed me. I don't want us to stay strangers. I love you. I've always loved you." But none of that came out. Instead, he forced a steadier tone. "I won't keep you. I just wanted to hear your voice." Another pause. This one shorter. Alex spoke quietly. "Yeah, well, I'm fine." It sounded unconvincing, but Daniel didn't push. "Okay," he breathed. "Good." He felt stupid. Small. Like a man who had spent decades building walls and now didn't know how to knock them down without hurting someone. Alex cleared his throat. "How long are you staying there?" That question hit Daniel by surprise. Small, hesitant, but it was a question. A thread thin, fragile, but real. "I'm not sure yet," Daniel said. "I've got work to finish up, things to sort through, maybe a week or 2. Alex didn't answer right away. Then, "All right." Just that, nothing more. But to Daniel, it was something, a tiny shift. A door cracked open, not wide, but not shut either. He dared to ask, gently, "Maybe we could talk again, when you're free." Alex inhaled sharply, like he didn't want to commit to anything. "We'll see." Daniel nodded, even though Alex couldn't see him. "Okay, that's fair." The call ended with a short, clipped goodbye. When the line went silent, Daniel kept the phone in his hand, staring at it like it might tell him what he'd done right or wrong. He let out a long, tired breath. It wasn't a warm call. It wasn't healing. It wasn't much. But it was something. A beginning. Or at least, the first step toward one. He set the phone down gently, like it held something delicate inside it. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel entirely alone. Not connected, not healed, but not alone. And that was enough for tonight. Part 6. The light that stayed on. Daniel stepped outside with a quiet, exhausted breath. The sky above Maple Hollow had dimmed into that soft, bluish gray that always came just before night fully settled. The repaired porch light waited beside him, still dark, still untested. He hesitated with the same small fear he used to feel as a child, when flipping a switch meant discovering whether he'd done something wrong again. But tonight, he wasn't a child. And even if he had made mistakes, he was trying. Slowly, Daniel reached for the switch. Click. The light flared to life, clean, steady, warm, not flickering, not dying out, just shining. He let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. It was such a simple thing, a bulb glowing on a front porch, but it felt like something inside him unlocked. As if all this time, he'd been waiting for permission to stand still long enough to see what hurt, instead of running from it. The light cast a soft gold across the steps where his mother once used to sit in the evenings, where she probably waited longer than she ever admitted. The same light that, in his memory, never went out, even though he had learned today that it had. Maybe she kept it on in other ways: phone calls, letters, recipes, small, quiet rituals of hope. He sank into the porch chair, elbows on knees, just staring at the glow. It didn't erase the guilt or fix the past, but it didn't need to. It was a beginning. A new beginning he hadn't dared imagine. For the first time since returning to Maple Hollow, Daniel didn't feel like an intruder in his own life. He simply sat there still, grounded, present under the light he had fixed with his own hands. A porch light that finally worked. A porch light that stayed on. And tonight, that was enough.